everybody! This is a topic that I've been wanting to cover for quite some time now, going back to 2017 when I was in grad school. Now what happened was, when I started learning languages, I was interested in language acquisition, how people learn languages. I was always interested in what methods were out there, what would work for me, what worked for other people. It's very interesting to see the variety that's out there and kind of study the theory behind it, although I never really did actually formally study the theory behind it, but I always thought that it was cool. But as time went by, the thing that started to interest me more was the mental aspects. I guess how it takes a toll on you mentally, or even the emotional aspects behind it. What interests me now is things like anxiety in language learning and how that affects your language learning, how your personality could affect your language learning, how really anything to do with that mental side can affect how you learn a language, and kind of what barriers there are. Now, throughout this past week on Twitter, I've been asking you guys a series of questions. I started out with a poll asking if language learning helps you with your anxiety, or if it's something that makes you feel more anxious. Now, I shouldn't be too surprised by the results. More than half of the people who participated in this poll said that the language learning process actually helps their anxiety. Some people commented down below and said it's a little bit of both, which I agree completely, but one of those seems to be dominant in a lot of people. There are people who give up on learning languages because they feel like they can never do it and they're anxious for different reasons. And then there are the people who end up doing it and still experience anxiety anyway, or anxious feelings, but for them the positive side is more dominant in their lives. I was interested to see which one was more dominant in the majority of people on Twitter who answered it. And a lot of them said that it was helpful. However, the people who responded to that and shared that first day were mostly the people who answered that it makes them feel more anxious. Then the second day, I asked the question to those who do feel more anxious when it comes to language learning, rather than it helping them heal from their anxiety. What they said, I asked them why. What parts of language learning induce anxiety or make them feel anxious? And there were two common responses, I would say, out of all of the people who answered, which, by the way, if you shared, thank you so much for sharing that, because I know that being honest and vulnerable can be a little bit scary. So thank you. But the people mostly said, there was one group that said speaking. Now, behind that, there were many different answers as to why, such as oversharing or being afraid that someone would make fun of you, different things. But then on the other side, it was the whole idea of expectation versus reality, not learning quick enough. I would group that in another category. So those were the two main categories that I noticed when it came to why language learning was anxiety-inducing for people. And it's very interesting because when I was in grad school, that became very real for me. When I was in high school and undergrad, yeah, I would be super anxious. I was even anxious to speak to my own mother and to my grandparents, and to an extent, I still am when it comes to speaking in Spanish. It's this thought of, I'm not a native, I'll never be, and even though I know that natives make mistakes in their own native language, there's still this feeling of, I don't want to do that, and it's a mental barrier to get over, or a hurdle to overcome. This really interested me. However, what happened in grad school was different. I did enjoy talking to people, even though the build-up to talking to these people made me really nervous or anxious. I still enjoyed it once I got the ball rolling. But in grad school, it was different. Now, my story, I tell that more in my language rep video. To this day, I still don't completely know why I became super anxious. I could tell you some of it were environmental factors, responses that I got when I would speak the language, the situations in which I used it weren't always positive. They were more high stress, high pressure, which made it not very fun to use the language, and I kind of correlated that to my language learning. At least that's my theory. I don't study psychology or anything, so take it for what it's worth, but don't take it as fact. This is just my personal experience. And during that time, I became very passionate about that because I wanted to know more about... See, when I have a struggle, I like to research about it. That's just how my brain works. I like to learn more about it and see maybe what I could do, where the root is, like the root cause of this issue that I'm facing, or this struggle, or this challenge, and then maybe how I could even overcome that if possible. And what made me interested there was I became interested in the emotional or more mental effects of interpreting. And I had written a paper about that, and that was really cool what I learned about it. Now, one of the things that I learned is that foreign language anxiety is a thing. Somebody did a study on it in 1986, and they defined it basically as people who are learning a language and they have to speak it. Anyone who experiences anxious feelings while using it in that context, so studying a foreign language, that is basically a very loose definition of foreign language anxiety. And what's interesting about that is you don't have to have an anxiety disorder, such as general anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, separation anxiety, any phobias or anything. You don't have to have any of those in order to experience foreign language anxiety. And a lot of the symptoms that you would experience when you do have foreign language anxiety are very similar to general anxiety disorder. For example, physical symptoms such as heart palpitations and sweating. Also, there are the other types of symptoms such as freezing and, in other words, forgetting phrases, words, grammatical structures in the middle of a conversation. Feeling impending doom. Feeling, I guess, very anxious, like things are going to go wrong. That kind of experience. So things like that. And very similar to general anxiety disorder. Now, it's interesting because there's not a lot of research out there on this. It's something that's becoming more popular with time, but it's not something that is widely researched. So there's not a lot out there on it. And if you go to look up anxiety in languages, you won't find a whole lot at this point. At least I've had trouble finding some resources on it, and that's why I wanted to share with you about that. Now, one of the things that I've read was that social support is one of the best things. It's a way to cope. There are different coping methods for anxiety and foreign language anxiety, even more specifically. And with that, social support is one of them. Now, the resources that I'm going to mention, all of them have to do with social support, and this isn't the only way, the only coping method that's out there, but it's the one that I wanted to touch upon since people like to talk about the polyglot community, a group of people who support each other, and we're always encouraging each other, and instead of pressuring each other to perform to a certain standard, we're always there cheering each other on or saying, no, it's okay, take a break, you need it. So I have 3 resources for you. That's 6. I have 3. 3 resources for you. The first one is the Mesoguild podcast. Donovan mentions in one of his episodes he has one on crippling anxiety, as well as a correlating blog post that you can read as well. And with that, he talks about his experience with performance anxiety, which would be the foreign language anxiety, so speaking it with other people, and how it never really went away for him, and it actually got worse with time, and he's not sure why he's experiencing it. But he gives some of his coping strategies, and I would recommend that if you're looking for some when it comes to speaking or having a language exchange. The second resource is a blog post on Imposter Syndrome that is written by Richard from Polyglossic. And I really like this post because Imposter Syndrome, if you don't know what that is being afraid basically that you're not good enough, that you'll be found out. In other words, that you're a fraud and that people are going to find out that you don't actually know as much as you think and that all those fears are going to come true. And what he says is the antidote to imposter syndrome is community. And I really did like that blog post a lot. And if you're somebody who enjoys being in community and wants to speak languages, I would recommend that post because it is full of good information. And then the last resource that I have is Elena Gabrielli's website, Hitoritabi. I really like it. I came across it when I was looking for someone to interview for Assassins of Language Learning, specifically on anxiety. And I came across her Twitter account and her Facebook group, The Quiet Language Learner's Nest. Now, going back to social support, it talks about, well, community. Having a group of people to support each other, be there for each other, encourage each other. And her group is all about that. It's the Quiet Language Learner's Nest. It is for shy, introverted, anxious learners. I love her website because contrary to what's really out there, what people talk about all the time when it comes to language learning and language methods, she talks about not necessarily pressuring yourself to speak from day one. It's a different perspective to what's really popular. Not pressuring yourself to speak from day one, not pressuring yourself in general, being kind to yourself, what language learning is like for quiet learners. And recently she's been having different guest posts on her website, so you can hear the story from other quiet language learners as well and their experiences. She has great posts on tips for anxious learners, as well as being creative with language learning, different things you can do, activities if you're anxious. And this one is good because with this resource, her blog, you don't have to necessarily want to speak with other people. This is more, you can still use it I do too. You can still use it if you want to practice speaking and get better at speaking, but also if you're not into the speaking portion of learning a language and you're more interested in reading or writing, input rather than output, then this is also a great resource for you because no one actually forces you to do anything. It's a very low pressure type of group, low stress. It's got this really calm environment and it's been really positive so far. I really, really like that group, and that's why I wanted to share it with you because I think that more people need to know about this. She also does have a free course on her website that you can check out, and she does have a new resource now about cultivating your language learning, and that one you can check out as well on her website. So I'll link all of these resources in the description box or around the video. Be on the lookout for them. I am really grateful to all of you who answered truthfully. If there's anything that I really learned from this over this past week about talking about our struggles together, it's that we're not alone. A lot of our fears are the same. Pretty much everything that everyone mentioned was something I could relate to, and I know other people felt the same way because they mentioned it as well. And I think it's great that we can start this conversation because when we have that community, that social support that they talk about in studies and things, being able to share that is freeing. It's really nice because we know that we're not alone, but then also we can help each other out. We could talk about our coping methods together or have this nice sense of community and be there for each other along in the journey. Because in reality, the language journey is not as exciting when you're alone. I'm an introvert, but I learn languages to connect with other people. Now, maybe that's not the case for you and you're totally happy being completely by yourself, but even the people in the Quiet Language Learner's Nest who enjoy being alone and they're introverted, we still have a community. And it's a place where we can share about what we're doing and what our goals are, all these kinds of different things together. And I wanted to share that with you guys because even though there aren't many resources out there, there still are resources out there. And I wanted to give you guys some options of where you can go and what might help you depending on what you're hoping to get out of learning languages, what your goals are, and the kinds of issues that you run into, the hurdles or challenges that you experience. And it is a real thing for me. I know people think, oh, you're on YouTube and I can't believe you're an introvert because you're on YouTube, or I can't believe you're shy, I can't believe you'd experience anxiety. That's not the case. It took me forever to get used to being in front of a camera, and to an extent, I still feel weird about it. So there's that. But also, being in this community of people and knowing that I'm not alone also really helps. And trust me, before a Skype session, whether it's a lesson with a tutor or even a friend of mine, I still get nervous. I still get that performance anxiety of, what are they going to think? And then it ends up messing things up rather than helping, because I'm so focused on not looking stupid or trying to get something right that it actually doesn't help me speak or use my language skills or showcase them to their full potential, because my mind is distracted rather than clear and focused. Alright, that's all for this week. Let me know down below if language learning actually helps you with your anxiety, which that's also what Hitori Tabi is all about. It's using language studying as a tool for self-care. Or if the more dominant feeling for you is that it actually induces your anxiety. Why? Why does it provoke it? What aspects of it? Or if you experience a little bit of both, what coping mechanisms or coping strategies have worked for you? We'd love to know. And thank you once again so much to everybody who's participated in the tweets and the chats this week. It's been very, very nice getting to know a little bit more about you and what we all struggle with as well. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!